Right. Hi, my name is Jim Willenbring. I'm part of the organizing committee for the 2021 Collegeville Workshop on Scientific Software with a focus on software teams. Today, I'm joined by Nicolas Renaud and Niels Drost from the Netherlands eScience Center. Nicolas and Niels are two of the co-authors of a white paper submitted to the Collegeville Workshop called Structured and Unstructured Teams for Research Software Development at the Netherlands eScience Center. This paper explores different teaming models used at the eScience Center with a focus on how different people can be a better or worse fit for teams with varying levels of structure. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for agreeing to be interviewed today. You understand we'll record this interview for the workshop and make it available on YouTube? That's okay?
That's okay.
All right, so if you two would first please briefly introduce yourselves.
Niels, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm Niels Drost. I'm a program manager at the eScience Center. I worked a lot in different projects over the years. Originally, I'm actually a computer scientist by trade, but now at the eScience Center, I really like to contribute to doing actual making scientific input, also outside of computer science, and that's it, I think, for me.
And my name is Nicolas Renaud. I'm one of the section head at the center. I'm the section head for the natural science and engineering section. So I'm overseeing all the engineers in that section, and I'm also involved in quite a few of the projects in that section. Most of them revolve around quantum chemistry and material science, which is my background. So it's a natural transition for me from a purely academic environment to the science center, which is a little bit at the border of academia. And I've been at the center for 4 years now. Started as an engineer, then as some sort of a manager that we had at some point, and now section head for a couple of months.
Great, thank you. Can you tell me just a little bit more about the Netherlands eScience Center and the role that research software engineers play there?
Yeah, so the eScience Center is the Center for Software Engineering in the Netherlands. It's publicly funded by NWO, which is the main scientific organization in the Netherlands, and SURF, who are the people handling all the architecture in the Netherlands. Our mandate is really to bridge the gap between academic research and software engineering. So we're trying to develop software together with academic partners on their projects. And through this project, we're also trying to improve the quality of software engineering in academia, both on the project, so really working with them and showing them how to develop their software better. And we also have quite a lot of training programs where we invite PhD students and postdocs, and we teach them the basic of version control, continuous integration, and so on.
Great. So we'll dig a little bit deeper into your white paper now. You mentioned in the paper that some people are split onto multiple projects. How many projects do RSEs typically work on at one time?
Should I take that one?
Yeah, of course, go.
Yeah, so so it varies from person to person, of course. But what we do see is that a lot of our projects are somewhere in the vicinity of one person, so like one FTE, and just to make sure that the projects do well. And over the years, we found out that then actually just doing it by yourself is actually not the best way to get these projects to produce nice results. So in general, people work on at least 2 projects, so they could be like 2 halves. But in some of the teams, people also started actually working on a number of projects together. So then if it's like 5 people, then they probably have in the vicinity of 5 projects as well. So then they would all work this large number of projects.
Okay. So the teaming description in your white paper sounds very fluid. Teams change modes of operation, maybe starting with a less formal team and moving to greater formality as the project develops. And teams may work on one product during one iteration and maybe another product the next, it sounds like. On what timescales do these modes of operation typically change? How frequent are these changes, and what are the points at which they do change?
I think that depends a lot from the teams. If we go to the most structured team, I think most of them have like a 2-week cycle, give or take, maybe a bit longer these days. And so during this cycle, some of them are really going to focus on one project only and switch to another project on another week. If we go to the less structured part of the team that we have, it might be that they change, on the maybe daily basis sometimes, right? Where some people really switch between 2 projects. It depends also a lot on the partners. So as I mentioned, we work with people on the other side, so on the academic side of things. And sometimes we're a bit dependent on what's happening on their side, right? So we are doing something with them, right? They have to test it, or they have to, do something with it to give us some feedback, and we have to wait for that to continue. So that's really maybe the two extreme, right? So really 2 week cycles, or a couple of day cycles. Some people work, mostly on themselves, because we still do have some of people who are working mostly on the project, on the two projects, and they're organizing their day a bit how they want that, right? So if they want to work on one project for an extended part of time, that's also fine, right? But they really have focus on this. If they want to switch more frequently, that's also fine for them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in those situations where you have maybe a 2-week sprint and a team is pretty focused on one project, how do you support those projects that maybe are not being worked on that sprint? It seems like, given the focus of some of the Agile and Scrum methodologies, that could be challenging.
Yeah, there's definitely a problem. There's if you do it too strictly, then you kind of lose some of the partners, right? If you tell them, well, we now did a sprint on your project, so please come back after 6, 7, 8 weeks, and then we'll get back to you. So that obviously doesn't work. One thing that a lot of the teams do is that there's one engineer in charge or in the lead for a certain project, and then of course like email and meetings and that sort of thing still happens. So you're still in contact, but yeah, it's a problem if you do it too strictly, and if you don't communicate this well enough with the partners, then they may get pretty upset. But sometimes actually works really well if you tell them, well, you now have like 6 weeks to really test this out. If you don't know what to do, let me know. We have a meeting, talk about it, and then in 6 weeks from now, whatever you come up with, we can actually work on with quite a big team for quite a long time, right? So it's also there is some benefit also to these partners. Some find it really, really nice that they have like nice long time to think about it, and then stuff is going to happen again. So sometimes it very depends on the project if this works out.
Yeah, I think the key is communication. Sorry, Jim. I think the key is communication. As long as you're transparent with the partner in what's going to happen when. I think it worked quite nicely. We had some unfortunate events where this communication was not ideal, and then the partner got frustrated for good reasons, I think. But yeah, as Niels mentioned, even if we're inactive for a long time, but it's the schedule and they know about it, and then we're going to focus on their project. That works well.
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to say. It sounds like if you're setting that common expectation and they know that it's not going to be 3 weeks from now for the next 6 months, that it's always going to be 3 weeks away. They know in 6 weeks we'll get this addressed. There's a lot of power in that. So okay, so you described in your paper a concept of collectives, and it sounds like it's between a project team and an agile team in terms of structure and formality, and basically a loose association of engineers that work on similar projects. How do these collectives form, and is there management influence in that? Do they form kind of organically between the teams, or how do you end up with these collectives?
So we only have one at the moment. I was pretty involved into it. I'm quite involved into it. Honestly, it came up mostly because of the working at home situation, right? So that was the initial idea. We were all like working on a very similar project in our living room, and we say, well, let's just try to, see each other a little bit more. So that's how it started, and it evolved in this idea of the collective, where it's, as you said, a loose collection of people that have a common interest but don't have a very structured way of working. And it works well, I think, because the project that we are doing in that team are very similar in a way, right? Most of them are about material science, right? So playing with molecules. So they have this in common, right? We're trying to compute molecular properties with different, methods and for different goals. So we can exchange a lot on this, right? And we can also, feed each other projects. From our past or from our own experience. In terms of technology, they have usually the same little bit of an overlap as well, right? It's very HPC intense, so we have this gigantic model, and they have to be a bit faster than they used to be. So there as well, we can really exchange on the technology side of things as well. And because this overlap exists, right, we can help each other. If someone gets stuck because they have a problem and they don't know how to fix it, most likely someone can help. But without having this structured environment of we're going to define the task, distribute them, and then try to check them all in 2 weeks' time.
Okay, thanks. So in the teams and people section of your paper, you speak about different team styles being better for some people. What percentage of people do you think are well suited for the less structured teams or for the more structured teams? And what percentage of the people maybe are able to be effective in a variety of different models?
It's for you, Niels.
It's a great question. So I think it's a very tough one to answer, mostly because also besides like the personalities, it also very much depends on the circumstances, if this works and what somebody's preferred way of working is, right? So obviously if a project is huge and there's a lot of like software engineering involved and not a lot of politics, so it's quite easy to find out what to do, and then there's loads of stuff to do, then I think most people will probably be comfortable going on a more structured side of things, right? Because there's stuff to do, and otherwise we keep losing track of what to do what, and we start 15 things, and it's really annoying. So then I think there's more people that are inclined to go towards the structured approach, while, well, if everything's completely unknown what to do, and by the time you find out what to program, you're done, then I think everybody agrees that there's no use to have any sort of structure because it's just talking instead of doing. And where people find this optimum lies, I think is a very personal thing and very much depends on the project. So I wouldn't venture to actually put a number on this. But Nico, do you have?
Well, I don't know how many people would be more comfortable if we count roughly the people in the most structured team we have. It's probably 15, give or take, I would say. And in the less structure, maybe a bit more at the moment, 15 plus. I wouldn't venture more than that. And also, it's also because we have two very different type of people, right? We have people at the center that are mostly interested in the research, and some people are mostly interested in the software, right? And I think these two, for the very research-oriented project, right, will attract the most research-oriented people. I think they do better in an unstructured environment where they can explore and try out a few things, right? And for the people who are really passionate about software or really want to deliver the highest quality software, I think they might do better in an environment that is a bit more structured, where we really have strong guideline on what needs to be done. So I think in our case, it's probably 50-50, give or take, right? But in general, I don't know much more than that.
Yeah, so there's a good mix maybe anyhow.
Yeah, definitely. And I also I think there's quite a fair amount of people that are kind of in the middle. Right, so that maybe it's like 10% is on the one extreme, 10% is the other extreme, and 80% is actually kind of in the middle, depending on what they're trying to do at a certain moment.
Yeah. And some people want to explore. So, a lot of people who come from academia, for example, have never been in a very structured team. So they're interested in just trying out to see if that fits them. Right? So we do have a lot of people who, go in and out and change mode of working, not on a monthly basis, but, half a year or something, just to try something new.
Okay. Yeah. So Niels, you mentioned a large project without a lot of politics. If we had more time, we could do a whole nother interview on that. I'd love to hear about such a project.
It's a bit mythical, right? I always say that by the time you figure out what to do, you're like more than halfway done.
Yeah.
In most of our projects, maybe even like 75-80% of the way there.
Yeah. So looking again at the kinds of teams that are associated with the projects, we mentioned how they can sometimes evolve over time as the project advances. As this evolution happens, do people tend to stay with the project and the type of team that they're in evolves, or do you tend to kind of swap out, like Nicolas was saying about, where some people are maybe more research oriented and some are more production oriented, and so therefore the team evolves, or is it a mixture of that?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of different things going kind of on at the same time in teams. So one thing you see is that teams also tend to find out what works best for them over time. So they kind of move along a bit, and if projects change, this is a very great reason to change the way of working. But you also see that like new projects where everything's unclear, very often people will say, well, it's great that we're doing this very kind of structured approach with trying to come up with what to do, but now I'm just going to work on this for 3 weeks. So see you in 3 weeks while I go figure stuff out. And then only after, there's a slightly more clear path towards something that looks like a deliverable, maybe I'll come back to you and we can work on this together. So this is also something that happens, that kind of people kind of either just as a task say figure out, right? And then like I have a 2-week task of figuring stuff out, or just completely don't bother with putting any sort of structure on it. So you actually see this happening within teams.
Okay. So one last thread I wanted to pull on here. You said in the paper, when overlap between these projects is sufficient, team members can easily contribute to several projects. So in my experience, there can be times when people think roles with different projects will create synergies, but end up resulting in splintering of their time and decreased productivity. How would you describe sufficient overlap in this context?
That's a good question, I guess. That's a little bit what I talked about for the collective, right? Where we do have both, a domain overlap and a technology overlap. Yep. Is it sufficient? I don't know. Right? Sometimes, so we have a stand-up in this collective every morning or so, and sometimes you see that there is not much in common, right? And then we have trouble helping each other. And sometimes there is something that we can all address, and then we help each other. So I don't think it leads to splintering the time, because we all work with all the members of this collective work on their own project and with people helping them when possible. So I think that doesn't fragments the time of this engineer on that project. Is it enough, right, to have this overlap in terms of domain and technology to actually form something that is a collective and it's beneficial, right? That's something we're exploring still. As I mentioned, it's not even been a year that we're trying that out. So we're very much in the exploring phase for that as well. And we'll see where that takes us. It's a natural moment for us actually to look back at this collective, because the project are going to end in not too long, right? So there's a question what's going to happen to this collective afterwards. It used to be that we had this nice collection of projects that we could form a collective around, but when this project stops, what's going to happen? So we might not have collective in the future. We might have more collective in the future. We'll try to find that out. But yeah, the sufficient overlap, I don't have a good answer for that. That's, I think as simple as that.
Okay,
but Niels, it's a little bit the same thing. That's a little bit same thing in your team or in Team Beta, Niels, where you have also very similar projects.
Well, what you do see actually is that most teams have some sort of focus, if only in their own, in the way they talk about their team, right? So you do see that the teams kind of resolve around something. So some teams do projects that are very close in the domain. And some domains are pretty aligned with their technology, right? So if you mostly work with climate science data, then all the data kind of has the same format, right? Even so, then all the tools are kind of also the same, and what you can pick from is what's kind of obvious to choose. Sometimes even the programming languages start to be kind of familiar, and that really helps. That if you consistently chose kind of the same tools to do something, then people get quite comfortable, right? And that's really nice. But yeah, if you just take a random collection of projects that have nothing in common, like there's one project on some archaeology thing, and then there's a project on structural mechanics, and one on economy or something, then yeah, as a team you really struggle. People really feel this context switch to be something that they have to think for like a day and a half to switch projects, which basically means you have to make the switch time like a month or something, right? And if you work on 4 projects, then we just did a sprint on your project. See you next quarter. That's not going to work, right? So you really need to have something closer to do that. That said, people have been pretty creative at combining different things. So we actually have a team now that did a lot of work on infrastructure for climate science. Is now going to work on infrastructure for life sciences. And then actually it turns out it's kind of the same tools and Docker and containers and workflows, right? So then the technology is what's bind these projects, while the domains are very different, and it's not really a problem. Or not. I would say it is, of course, like additional mental energy that you need. So you have to be careful, but it's definitely possible.
Okay. So thank you. Do either of you have any final thoughts for the interview?
Well, I want to mention that it was fun thinking about it in this structured way. So thanks for the call and the workshop. It's been a really interesting internal discussion also on what makes a good team and that sort of thing.
Yeah. the discussion we have at the moment again, right? So we restructured the entire center not so long ago. And so now the question is how the team fit, right, in this new structure is wide open, right? And actually writing this paper was, a good way for us to kickstart that discussion internally again. So that's, that was really fun to write, actually.
Yeah, and hopefully we can continue these discussions at the workshop coming up. So, all right. On behalf of the organizing committee, thank you both for your submission to the workshop and for today's interview. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for hosting us, and see you at the workshop, I guess.